I was 30 seconds into my funding pitch when Professor Lancaster's eyes glazed over. 30 damn seconds. 5 years of research, 3 sleepless weeks preparing this presentation, and the bastard was already checking his watch. The climate models clearly indicate, I continued, clicking to my next slide. Dr. Roberts, Lancaster interrupted. We've seen similar projections before. What makes your approach different? My mouth went dry. The laser pointer trembled in my hand, casting a jittery red dot across my carefully crafted graphs. I had the data. I had the science. What I didn't have was their attention. If you'll allow me to continue. We've made our decision, Chancellor Wilson said, closing her folder with a snap that echoed like a gunshot in the conference room. The funding will go to Dr. Sutton's project. 2 hours later, I was still sitting in my office, staring at the wall. My blonde hair had escaped its professional bun, and my reflection in the computer screen showed mascara smudges beneath my blue eyes. 33 years old and watching my career implode. Screw this, I muttered, grabbing my purse. The department would survive without me for the afternoon. The bar was mercifully dark when I walked in, perfect for drowning academic sorrows. I ordered a whiskey neat from the bartender who didn't ask questions. I liked him immediately. 3 drinks in, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire, working late again. Don't wait up. Claire, my girlfriend of 3 years. Beautiful, brilliant Claire, who understood my work schedule because hers was just as demanding at the University Medical Research Lab. Claire, who hadn't been to working late, nearly as often as she'd claimed. I paid my tab and headed across campus. The biomedical building was quiet at this hour. I knew her lab code, her birthday, because she was that predictable, and slipped inside. The lights were on, but the lab equipment sat untouched. Then I heard it. Soft laughter from the supply closet. I should have walked away. Instead, I yanked open the door. Claire was pressed against the shelves, lab coat unbuttoned, with her hands tangled in Dr. Ariel Weiss's dark hair. My colleague. My goddamn grant competitor. Ivy! Claire gasped, pushing Ariel away. This isn't... Save it, I said, my voice eerily calm. How long? 3 months, Ariel answered when Claire couldn't. I wanted her to tell you. I nodded, feeling strangely detached. Congratulations on the grant, by the way. Was sleeping with my girlfriend part of your research methodology? I walked out, ignoring Claire's calls behind me. Back in my apartment, I methodically packed her things into boxes. Toothbrush, books, the ridiculous coffee mug collection. By midnight, everything that was hers stood stacked by the door. The next morning, Department Head Morrison called me into her office. I expected a reprimand for missing afternoon appointments. Instead, she looked at me with something like sympathy. You look like shit, Ivy. Thank you, Catherine. Always a pleasure. She sighed. I heard about your funding. And about Claire and Ariel. News travels fast, I muttered. Small campus. She slid a brochure across her desk. I think you need this. I picked it up skeptically. Clearwater Temple Meditation Retreat. Seriously? It's a sabbatical opportunity. 4 weeks of silence, meditation, and absolutely no academic politics. She leaned forward. Your research is brilliant, Ivy, but you're spiraling and we both know it. Take the break, reset, come back stronger. I'm not the meditation type. You're the stubborn, overthinking type who needs to disconnect before you burn every bridge on campus. Catherine's voice softened. The university will cover it. Consider it professional development. I stared at the brochure's serene waterfall image. 4 weeks away from Claire's tearful explanations. Away from Lancaster's dismissive glances. Away from failure. When does it start? I asked. Friday. Pack light. And Ivy? She smiled slightly. No research papers allowed. I shoved the brochure in my bag, already wondering if I could smuggle in my laptop. The rain pelted the shuttle windows as we wound our way up the mountain road to Clearwater Temple. Perfect weather for my mood. 3 days since I'd packed a single suitcase and fled Boston, and the ache in my chest hadn't subsided one bit. First time at a meditation retreat? Asked the elderly woman beside me, her hands folded neatly over a worn copy of some spiritual text. That obvious? She chuckled. You've checked your phone 17 times in the last 10 minutes. I shoved my phone deeper into my pocket. They're taking it away when we arrive. 4 weeks without digital contact feels medieval. Or liberating, she suggested. I didn't respond. Liberation was the last thing I felt as the shuttle pulled through ornate wooden gates and stopped before a sprawling traditional temple complex. The main building rose 3 stories high, its swooping roof lines glistening with rain. A monk in simple gray robes greeted us with a bow. Welcome to Clearwater. Please surrender all electronic devices before entering the sacred space. I reluctantly placed my phone in the wooden box he offered, like removing a limb. Your daily schedule, he said, handing me a printed card. First meditation begins in 30 minutes. Your room is in the East Wing, number 17. My room, a glorified cell, contained a narrow bed, a cushion for meditation, and a small desk. No TV, no Wi-Fi, not even a damn clock. I unpacked methodically, hanging my clothes in the tiny closet, placing my toiletries in the adjoining bathroom. The room smelled of sandalwood and resignation. The temple bell rang, its low resonance vibrating through the floorboards. Grudgingly, I followed the sound to the main meditation hall. About 30 people sat cross-legged on cushions, arranged in concentric circles. I took an empty spot near the back, mimicking their posture while my knees already protested. A senior monk sat at the center, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. Welcome, he said without opening his eyes. For the next 4 weeks, you will journey inward. The outer world will wait. Here, we practice noble silence during meditation periods. Your mind will resist. Let it. Noble silence. Right. My mind was already screaming about the grant proposal I should be revising, the emails piling up, the conversation with Claire I'd never gotten to finish. Focus on your breath, the monk continued. When thoughts arise, acknowledge them, then return to your breath. I closed my eyes and tried. My back ached, my thoughts ricocheted. 3 minutes in, I was mentally redesigning my climate models. 10 minutes in, I was replaying every mistake in my failed presentation. 20 minutes in, I was plotting elaborate revenge scenarios involving Claire and a very public humiliation. When I finally opened my eyes, most people seemed transported to some higher plane of existence. Not me. I felt like I'd spent the hour wrestling an octopus. That's when I noticed her. Sitting directly across the circle, a woman with vibrant red hair pulled into a loose bun. Eyes closed, face serene. Unlike me, she appeared completely at home in this strange setting. Something about her stillness drew my gaze. When the bell rang to end meditation, her eyes fluttered open, startlingly green, and for a brief moment, they met mine. She smiled slightly, then looked away. Dinner was served in silence, a vegetarian meal I barely tasted. I kept glancing around for the redhead, but didn't spot her among the bowed heads and mindful eating. Back in my room, I lay awake, listening to rain drumming against the roof. This was a mistake. I'd never last 4 weeks. The second day was worse. Morning meditation, walking meditation, working meditation, afternoon meditation, evening meditation. By the third meditation session, my patience had evaporated entirely. This is ridiculous, I muttered, shifting on my cushion for the 100th time. A small snort of laughter came from my right. The redhead from yesterday had taken the cushion beside me. Her eyes remained closed, but her lips twitched with suppressed amusement. Noble silence, I whispered sarcastically. More like noble torture. Her shoulders shook slightly with silent laughter. The monk leading the session cleared his throat pointedly in our direction. I straightened, attempting to look enlightened. The redhead composed herself, but when she briefly opened one eye to glance at me, I saw mischief dancing there. After the session, as we filed out toward the dining hall, she fell into step beside me. I'm Margaret, she said quietly. You're making this much more entertaining than my last retreat. Ivy, I replied. Glad my spiritual suffering amuses you. First day is always the hardest. Her voice was warm like honey over gravel. By day 10, you'll be floating in nirvana. Day 10? I'll be clinically insane by day 5. Margaret laughed, a sound so genuine it momentarily lightened the weight I'd been carrying. Maybe that's the point. Breakdown to breakthrough. Something about her easy confidence made me curious. You do this often? Twice yearly, clears my head. Before I could respond, the lunch bell rang, signaling the return to silence. Margaret winked and walked away, her graceful movements suggesting years of meditation practice. I watched her go, feeling the first genuine smile cross my face since arriving at Clearwater Temple. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, staring at the handwritten note posted outside my room. Due to ongoing renovations in the East Wing, all residents in rooms 15 to 20 would need to share accommodations in the West Wing for the next 2 weeks. After a week of silent meals and sore knees from meditation, this was the last thing I needed. I trudged across the courtyard, dragging my suitcase through morning mist, and found my reassigned room, number 42. I knocked once before entering. The room was larger than mine had been, with 2 beds instead of 1. A familiar cascade of red hair caught my eye immediately. Margaret sat cross-legged by the window, reading a scientific journal, not exactly standard meditation retreat material. She looked up, surprise crossing her face before transforming into a pleased smile. "Dr. Roberts? You're my new roommate?" I blinked. "How do you know my title?" Margaret dog-eared her page, some article about quantum physics, and stood. I should probably introduce myself properly. Margaret Thomas. I'll be your new research assistant when we return to Boston University next semester. My suitcase thudded to the floor. You work at BU? In my department? Starting January. I just finished my PhD in environmental physics at MIT. Your climate modeling work is actually what inspired me to apply for the position. I sat heavily on what would be my bed for the next 2 weeks. Margaret Thomas. The name finally clicked. Wait, you're MT Thomas? Author of Quantum Applications in Environmental Degradation Forecasting? She nodded. Looking pleased, I recognized her work. That's me? I cited your paper in my last grant proposal, the one that got rejected, but I didn't mention that. And now I'll be helping implement your atmospheric carbon tracking system. She grinned. Small world. Small indeed. I studied her more carefully now. Margaret Thomas, brilliant emerging scientist and apparently meditation enthusiast. The contradiction fascinated me. What brings a cutting-edge physicist to a place with no electricity? I asked, unpacking my meager possessions. Balance. She shrugged. The mind needs rest as much as stimulation. What about you? You don't exactly seem like the meditation type. Forced sabbatical, department head's orders. I hesitated, then added, professional and personal life both imploded simultaneously. Margaret nodded, asking no further questions. I appreciated that. Over the next few days, our room became a sanctuary from the strict temple routine. After evening meditation, we'd break noble silence, whispering about research, university politics, and gradually, our lives outside academia. So no partner waiting for you back home? I asked one night, immediately regretting the personal question. Not anymore. Eliza and I broke up 6 months ago. She couldn't understand why I'd waste my talent on climate science when quantum computing pays better. Eliza, I repeated, processing this casual revelation. Your ex is a woman. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Problem with that, Dr. Roberts? No. God, no. I fumbled. My ex, Claire. She's also a woman. I just didn't expect that I'd be gay too? Margaret laughed softly. Now that's an interesting assumption to unpack during meditation. I felt my cheeks flush. I don't make a habit of discussing my private life with future colleagues. Fair enough, she said. Though technically I won't be your direct report. I checked before accepting the position. The information hung between us, seemingly casual yet oddly significant. On our 10th day at the temple, the meditation master announced a dawn hike to welcome the equinox. We assembled in the pre-dawn darkness, following a line of paper lanterns up a mountain trail. Margaret walked beside me, her breathing steady despite the steep climb. When the path narrowed through a rocky section, she went ahead, turning back to offer her hand. I hesitated before taking it. Her fingers were warm against mine, grip firm as she helped me navigate the awkward terrain. When I stumbled on loose gravel, her other hand caught my waist, steadying me. Careful, she murmured, her face close to mine in the dim light. Our hands remained connected longer than necessary, her thumb absently brushing against my knuckles before finally letting go. At the summit, we watched sunrise break over distant mountains, casting the valley in gold. The scene was breathtaking, but I found myself stealing glances at Margaret instead, studying how the light illuminated the angles of her face, the green of her eyes. Worth waking up for? She whispered. I nodded, unable to articulate whether I meant the sunrise or her company. That afternoon, during working meditation, I found Margaret in the temple garden, harvesting vegetables for the evening meal. I joined her, relishing the opportunity to work alongside someone who didn't require noble silence. "So," she said, pulling a carrot from the earth, "once we're back in civilization, would you be open to discussing some modifications to your carbon tracking algorithms? I have ideas about incorporating quantum fluctuations into your models." The question was purely professional, yet something in her tone felt like an invitation to more than academic collaboration. "I'd like that," I replied, watching her hands expertly sort through greenery. Hands that had held mine that morning. "Maybe dinner? To discuss the research, of course." Margaret smiled, a strand of red hair falling across her face as she looked up. Of course. Strictly professional. But the way she said it, neither of us quite believed it. 2 weeks into the retreat, I could almost touch my toes without wincing and sit through a full hour of meditation without mentally redesigning my research methods. Progress, I supposed. The evening meditation had just concluded when the temple plunged into darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the hall, followed by the meditation master's calming voice. "Friends, it appears we have lost power. Please remain seated while we bring emergency lanterns." I felt a hand brush my shoulder. Margaret, identifying herself with a gentle squeeze. "Want to make a break for it?" she whispered. In the darkness, I smiled. "Lead the way." We slipped out as monks distributed candles, our exit covered by the commotion. The hallways were pitch black, moonlight unable to penetrate the temple's deep interior. "Take my hand," Margaret said, her fingers finding mine. "I know this place better than you." Her palm was warm against mine as she led me through the labyrinthine corridors. We moved slowly, her free hand trailing along the wall for guidance. When I stumbled over an unseen step, she pulled me against her to prevent my fall. For a moment we stood there, bodies pressed together in the darkness, her arms around me. I could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, against my own racing pulse. "Sorry," I murmured, making no attempt to move away. "Don't be." Her voice was low, breath warm against my ear. A monk rounded the corner with a lantern, illuminating our embrace. We jumped apart like guilty teenagers, and I was grateful the dim light hid my flushed face. "The eastern courtyard has emergency generators," Margaret said once the monk passed. "We could go there." The courtyard was lit by solar-powered path lights, just bright enough to see each other clearly. We sat on a stone bench beneath a maple tree, the night unexpectedly chilly. When I shivered, Margaret moved closer, her warmth radiating through the thin fabric of my retreat clothes. "Better?" she asked. I nodded, hyper-aware of our touching shoulders, our knees occasionally brushing. "You know," she said, looking up at stars now visible without electric light pollution, "I never expected to meet someone like you here. A reluctant meditator? A brilliant scientist who's changing how we understand climate systems." She turned to face me. "Someone who makes me think differently." Something shifted between us, a current I couldn't name but certainly felt. "We should head back," I said, suddenly nervous about where this conversation might lead. In our shared room, candles had been placed on the small desk. Margaret lit them while I changed into sleep clothes behind the privacy screen. The soft glow transformed our austere quarters into something almost romantic. I climbed into bed, watching Margaret's silhouette as she prepared for sleep. When she blew out the candles and darkness enveloped us again, I closed my eyes but found sleep elusive. That night, I dreamed of Margaret, her hands in my hair, her lips on mine, our bodies pressed together in ways that had nothing to do with preventing falls in darkened hallways. I woke with a start, heart pounding, to find morning light streaming through the window and Margaret already gone to early meditation. What was happening to me? I'd never been attracted to someone like her before, someone so different from my usual type. Claire had been pragmatic, driven, her ambition mirroring my own. Margaret was equally brilliant but somehow softer, her intelligence tempered by a spiritual awareness I'd always lacked. I avoided her gaze during morning meditation, afraid my dream might somehow show on my face. At breakfast, I chose a seat far from hers, needing space to process these unexpected feelings. My avoidance strategy worked until afternoon, when Margaret fell ill during working meditation. I noticed her face pale as we cleaned temple floors, her movements growing sluggish until she finally excused herself. I found her in our room an hour later, curled on her bed, shivering despite the mild day. "Food poisoning, I think," she managed. "Bad tofu at lunch." Without thinking, I pressed my palm to her forehead. You're burning up. I should have called a temple attendant. Instead, I filled our drinking pitcher with cool water and soaked a washcloth, placing it gently on her brow. She sighed at the contact, eyes closing. You'll miss evening meditation, she murmured. I'll survive. I sat beside her, adjusting the cloth when it slipped. Breaking the rules for me, Dr. Roberts? A weak smile played on her lips. Ivy, I corrected, surprising myself. If we're breaking rules together, you should use my first name. Ivy, she repeated softly. I stayed with her through evening meditation and dinner, dampening fresh cloths for her fever, helping her sip water when she could tolerate it. As night fell, I read aloud from the scientific journal she'd been studying, my voice low in our candlelit room. When she finally drifted to sleep, I found myself watching the rise and fall of her chest, feeling strangely protective. This wasn't mere professional courtesy. This wasn't even ordinary friendship. This was something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Something that scared me more than failed grants or faculty politics. I retreated to my own bed, but sleep eluded me again. Tomorrow would be our last full day at Clearwater Temple, then back to Boston, to labs and lectures and professional boundaries. I turned toward Margaret's sleeping form, watching until my eyes grew heavy. Whatever this was, I wasn't ready for it to end. 2 weeks after returning to Boston, life had settled into a surreal new pattern. By day, I was Dr. Roberts, respected climate scientist rebuilding her research program. By night, I was Ivy, lying awake thinking about Margaret Thomas. We'd exchanged numbers on the bus back to the city, promised to meet once we'd readjusted to civilization. Those 4 weeks of meditation had reset something in me, not just healing from Claire's betrayal, but opening up possibilities I hadn't considered before. When Margaret finally texted, suggesting breakfast at Rosie's family diner, my heart performed a completely unscientific flip. Saturday morning found me changing outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a green sweater that supposedly matched my eyes. I arrived 15 minutes early, sliding into a booth by the window to watch for her arrival. The diner was packed with weekend crowds. Margaret appeared in the doorway precisely on time, her red hair loose around her shoulders instead of in the practical bun I'd grown used to at the temple. She spotted me and smiled, weaving through the busy tables. This place is insane, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Sorry if you've been waiting long. Just got here, I lied, suddenly aware of how my knees were almost touching hers under the small table. A harried waitress dropped menus before rushing off. Margaret opened hers, eyes scanning options. I've been dreaming of real coffee for weeks. Not missing that temple tea? She laughed. 4 teaspoons of enlightenment, 1 of grass clippings. The familiar banter relaxed me. This was just Margaret. Brilliant, funny Margaret, who'd seen me at my most uncomposed, meditating badly and drooling in my sleep. We ordered enormous breakfasts, both apparently starving for food that actually had flavor. As Margaret stirred cream into her coffee, her foot accidentally brushed against mine under the table. She didn't move it away. So, she said, have you reacclimatized to academia? Barely. Everyone keeps commenting on how calm I seem. The Clearwater effect. It'll wear off once grading season hits. Our conversation flowed easily through breakfast, from department gossip to research ideas to terrible meditation jokes. Beneath the table, our legs remained in contact, neither of us acknowledging this subtle touch that sent electricity up my spine. When the check arrived, we both reached for it. Our hands collided, fingers tangling momentarily. I invited you, Margaret insisted. Professional courtesy, I countered, sliding my credit card to the waitress before she could argue further. Outside, snow flurries had begun, dusting Margaret's hair with tiny crystals that melted almost instantly. We stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, neither ready to end our time together. I've been meaning to ask, she said finally. Would you like to see my laboratory setup? I've been implementing some of those ideas we discussed at the temple. This wasn't part of our retreat conversations. This was real-world collaboration. Lead the way, I said. The science building was mostly empty on Saturday. Margaret swiped us into her newly assigned lab space, smaller than mine but impressively organized for someone who'd only been on campus 2 weeks. I've been adapting your carbon capture algorithms, she explained, bringing up models on her computer. See how the quantum approach changes projection outcomes? I leaned over her shoulder, close enough to catch the faint scent of her shampoo, something citrusy and bright. The models were fascinating, showing possibilities I hadn't considered. "This is brilliant," I said, genuinely impressed. "These adjustments could significantly improve accuracy." Margaret turned her head, our faces suddenly inches apart. "Really? You're not just being nice to your new assistant?" "I'm never nice just to be nice," I said, not moving away. "The science stands on its own." Her eyes dropped briefly to my lips, then back to meet my gaze. The air between us charged with something that had nothing to do with research. "Ivy," she began. A janitor's vacuum roared to life in the hallway, breaking the moment. I straightened, putting professional distance between us again. "We should incorporate these modifications into the main project," I said, voice overly formal. "Perhaps next week?" Margaret nodded, disappointment flashing across her face so quickly I almost missed it. We gathered our coats, the easy comfort of breakfast replaced by attention neither of us acknowledged. At the building entrance, we paused. "Thank you for showing me your work," I said stiffly. "Thanks for breakfast." She hesitated. "Listen, a few colleagues are getting together tonight at Harper's Pub. Nothing fancy, just drinks. Would you like to come?" The professional thing would be to decline. To establish proper boundaries with someone who would technically be working under my supervision, even if not directly reporting to me. Instead, I heard myself say, "What time?" Her smile was worth any professional awkwardness. 8, I can text you the address." We parted with a quick hug that lingered a beat too long. As I walked to my car, snow falling more heavily now, I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this alive, this electric with possibility, or this terrified of where it might lead. Margaret's laugh carried across the lab, drawing the attention of 2 graduate students hunched over microscopes. I pretended to focus on calibrating equipment while watching her explain a complex formula to a bewildered undergraduate. 3 weeks since our breakfast at Rosie's, and we'd fallen into a comfortable professional routine that did nothing to diminish the electricity between us. Later, alone in my office, I stared at a blank grant application. The cursor blinked accusingly while my thoughts wandered to Margaret's hands gesturing as she'd explained quantum principles earlier today. A knock interrupted my non-productivity. "Dr. Peterson wants to see you," my department assistant said. "Something about research assignments." I found Peterson sorting through faculty files, his perpetual frown deeper than usual. "Roberts, good. Sit." He pushed his glasses up. "I'm concerned about your working relationship with Dr. Thomas." My stomach dropped. "Is there a problem with her performance?" "Quite the opposite. Her work is exceptional." He tapped a folder. "Which is why I'm concerned about potential conflicts of interest." "I don't understand. Several faculty have noticed your proximity. Department policy discourages romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates." I felt my face heat. "Dr. Thomas and I maintain a strictly professional relationship. See that it stays that way." His expression softened slightly. "You're both brilliant scientists. I'd hate to see complications interfere with your work or reputations." I left his office with my mind racing. Were we that transparent? We hadn't even kissed, yet apparently our attraction was obvious enough to generate administrative concern. Margaret was waiting by my office door. "Everything okay? You look upset." I ushered her inside, closing the door. "Peterson just warned me about our proximity." "What?" Her eyes widened. "Apparently we're not as subtle as we thought." Margaret leaned against my desk, suddenly serious. "Would it be so terrible if people knew we were whatever we are?" The question hung between us. I thought about Claire, about departmental politics, about my carefully reconstructed professional reputation. "I can't risk my career right now," I said finally. "Not after everything with the grant failure, with Claire. I need stability." "I understand." Her voice was measured, giving nothing away. "You're right. We should maintain appropriate boundaries." "It's just timing," I added lamely. She nodded, professional mask firmly in place. "Of course. I should get back to the lab." That evening, I canceled plans to meet her for dinner, citing work commitments. She accepted my excuse without question, which somehow felt worse than an argument would have. The next week passed in careful distance. We collaborated on research, but our easy banter disappeared, replaced by formal exchanges about data and methodology. I told myself this was better, cleaner, more professional. I was lying to myself. Friday evening found me attending the department's monthly reception, a tedious affair made bearable only by free wine. I was nursing my second glass when Margaret entered, wearing a simple black dress instead of her usual lab attire. I nearly dropped my drink. She nodded politely in my direction before being surrounded by eager faculty members, all apparently fascinated by her research. I watched from across the room, recalling Peterson's warning, fighting the urge to join her circle. She's quite something, isn't she? I turned to find a striking woman beside me, dark-haired and confident. I'm sorry, do I know you? Elena Vasquez, she extended her hand. I'm visiting from MIT. Margaret and I worked together. Something in her proprietary tone set off warning bells. Your colleagues? We were more than that. Elena sipped her wine. For 3 years. I'm hoping we might be again. Understanding dawned. This was the ex-girlfriend, the one who'd criticized Margaret's career choices. She never mentioned you were visiting, I said carefully. It's a surprise. Elena smiled. I realized how short-sighted I was. Margaret's climate work is actually gaining significant attention now. Of course. Now that Margaret was earning recognition, Elena wanted back in. Before I could respond, Elena crossed the room toward Margaret, whose surprise was visible even from a distance. When Elena embraced her, Margaret returned the hug, briefly, but enough to make my chest tighten. I slipped out without saying goodbye to either of them. Monday morning, I was reviewing lab reports when I overheard 2 faculty members in the hallway. Thomas and Roberts. Everyone sees it. Terrible idea. Remember what happened with Michelson and his assistant? Career suicide. Roberts should know better. I shut my door, heart pounding. Was this how people saw me now? Not as a respected scientist, but as someone risking her reputation for an inappropriate relationship? When Margaret appeared for our scheduled meeting, I kept it ruthlessly professional, ignoring her attempts to discuss the reception or Elena's surprise appearance. Something had hardened in me, fear disguised as professionalism. After she left, I stared at the research we'd been developing together. Science made sense. Equations didn't break your heart or destroy your career. This growing feeling for Margaret, whatever it was, had to be contained, controlled, like a dangerous experiment. I was making the right choice. The only choice. So why did it feel like I was making the biggest mistake of my life? 2 weeks of professional distance had left me miserable but resolute. I'd thrown myself into work, staying late in my lab, avoiding communal spaces where I might encounter Margaret. When we did meet for research discussions, I kept conversations strictly scientific. Tonight, I'd stayed past midnight, analyzing climate data that could wait until morning. Anything to avoid my empty apartment and the thoughts that crowded in when I wasn't busy. My office phone rang, startling me. Who would call at this hour? Dr. Roberts, I answered. Ivy, it's Catherine Morrison. There's been a situation. Margaret Thomas was working late in the low-temperature lab. There's been some kind of maintenance error with the refrigeration unit. My blood ran cold. Is she hurt? She's trapped inside. Maintenance is working on it, but the override system is malfunctioning. I thought you should know. I was already grabbing my coat. I'm on my way. The low-temperature laboratory was in the building's basement. By the time I arrived, several maintenance workers were clustered around the sealed door of the walk-in refrigeration unit, tools scattered across the floor. What happened? I demanded. A technician looked up. Power surge triggered the safety locks. Dr. Thomas is inside, but communications are working. She's fine for now, just cold. Let me talk to her. I grabbed the radio from his hand. Margaret, it's Ivy. Are you all right? Her voice came through, slightly distorted. Just enjoying a refreshing midnight chill. Nothing to worry about. Even in danger, she maintained her wit. Something inside me uncoiled slightly. They're working on getting you out, I assured her. How cold is it in there? About -15 Celsius. My data samples are happy. I'm less thrilled. I turned to the head technician. How long before you can override the locks? He grimaced. The circuit board's fried. We're replacing it, but it's going to take at least an hour. She could develop hypothermia in that time, I said. As I heard that, Margaret's voice crackled through the radio. And I'm fine. I've got my coat. Lab coats weren't designed for sub-zero temperatures. I made a decision. And there's an emergency maintenance entrance, isn't there? For accessing the cooling systems? The technician nodded reluctantly. It's small. And once it's open, we can't close it properly until the main system's fixed. Open it, I said. 5 minutes later, I was squeezing through a narrow service panel into the frigid chamber. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath despite the heavy emergency coat they'd provided. Margaret sat on a metal bench, huddled in her lab coat, face pale but eyes bright with surprise as I emerged. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Ensuring the university doesn't lose its most promising new researcher." I sat beside her, immediately pressing against her side for warmth. Body heat conservation, basic survival tactic. She laughed shakily. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The maintenance team had provided thermal blankets, which I wrapped around both of us, creating a silver cocoon. Margaret's body trembled against mine. "I've been avoiding you," I said finally, the words forming visible puffs in the freezing air. "I noticed." She kept her eyes on the opposite wall. "Elena's back in Boston, permanently. She's taken a position at Northeastern." "I see." I tried to keep my voice neutral. "Are you considering reconnecting with her?" Margaret turned to face me, our noses inches apart in our silver nest. "Elena left because my work wasn't prestigious enough." "You're avoiding me because you think I'll damage your career." Neither approach suggests much faith in me as a scientist or a person. Her directness caught me off guard. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is," Margaret countered. "I requested a transfer to Dr. Abernathy's supervision 2 months ago. The paperwork was processed last week." I blinked in confusion. "You what?" I anticipated this issue before we even left Clearwater. I knew there might be something between us, and I wasn't going to let bureaucratic nonsense stand in the way. "You arranged a different supervisor?" "Before anything had even happened between us." She shrugged, the movement bringing us closer together. "I'm an excellent forecaster. It's why you cited my paper." The realization washed over me. There was no professional conflict. There hadn't been for over a week, and I hadn't even known. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You were too busy constructing walls to hear what I was trying to say." Her voice softened. "I understand fear, Ivy. I've made my own career-limiting choices, but sometimes the risk is worth taking." The cold seemed to fade as I processed her words. All my careful distancing had been unnecessary. Worse, it had been hurting us both. "I'm not good at this," I admitted. "Relationships, vulnerability. I built my life around scientific certainties." "Then approach this like an experiment," she suggested, breath warm against my cheek. "Test the hypothesis. Gather data. Draw conclusions." Before I could respond, the maintenance radio crackled. "Dr. Roberts? We've replaced the circuit board. Testing the override now." With a heavy clunk, the main door's locking mechanism disengaged. Technicians pulled it open, warm air rushing in like a blessing. Margaret stood, dropping the thermal blanket. Perfect timing. As we walked out, surrounded by concerned staff asking about our well-being, I caught her hand. She looked at me questioningly. "I'd like to conduct that experiment," I said quietly, "if the offer still stands." Her fingers tightened around mine, the warmth spreading up my arm and into my chest. "Hypothesis accepted," she whispered. "Dr. Roberts, they're ready for you in the main auditorium." I smoothed down my blazer and checked my reflection one last time. 6 months after the freezer incident, I stood backstage at the National Climate Science Conference, about to present our groundbreaking research. But I wasn't presenting alone. Margaret appeared beside me, elegant in a forest green dress that made her eyes seem impossibly brighter. Since we'd officially started dating 3 months ago, we'd been careful to maintain professional boundaries at work while allowing ourselves to explore what was growing between us in private. "Nervous?" she asked, straightening my collar with familiar intimacy. "Terrified," I admitted. "Last time I presented research, I lost my funding and discovered my girlfriend cheating in the same day." "Well, I can guarantee at least one of those things won't happen today." She squeezed my hand. "And our research is solid, revolutionary even." She wasn't exaggerating. Our combined approach to climate modeling had produced predictions more accurate than anything previously developed. Today's presentation wasn't just rehabilitation for my career, it was a genuine scientific breakthrough. The conference moderator's voice boomed through the speakers. "Please welcome Dr. Ivy Roberts and Dr. Margaret Thomas, presenting their work on quantum-integrated climate forecasting models." We walked onto the stage together, professional smiles fixed in place. As I began our presentation, the audience of distinguished scientists leaned forward in their seats, clearly intrigued. Margaret seamlessly took over for the technical sections, her explanation of the quantum principles underlying our work drawing appreciative murmurs. When we opened for questions, hands shot up across the auditorium. For 45 minutes, we fielded complex inquiries, our responses complementing each other's expertise. As the session ended, thunderous applause filled the hall. That, Margaret whispered as we exited, was better than meditation. The post-presentation reception buzzed with excited conversations. Colleagues who'd avoided eye contact after my funding disaster now crowded around, eager to discuss collaboration opportunities. Through it all, Margaret remained beside me, occasionally touching my arm or back in subtle gestures of support. Quite the triumph, Ivy. I turned to find Professor Lancaster, the man who'd rejected my previous grant application, extending his hand. Thank you, I replied, shaking it firmly. We should discuss your funding needs for the next phase. The foundation would be very interested. After he walked away, Margaret nudged me. See? Vindication. It's our success, not just mine, I corrected her. Her smile was private, intimate. I like the sound of our. We were interrupted by a familiar voice. Congratulations, darling. Claire stood before us, elegant as ever in a tailored suit. I hadn't seen her since our breakup nearly a year ago. Claire, I said, surprised. I didn't know you were attending this conference. Medical research overlaps with climate science more than you'd think. Her eyes flicked to Margaret, assessing. Won't you introduce us? Dr. Claire Winters, this is Dr. Margaret Thomas, my colleague and partner. The word felt significant on my tongue. Margaret, Claire is a medical researcher at Boston University. And Ivy's ex? Claire added unnecessarily. Quite the rebound, Ivy. I'm impressed. Margaret's expression remained pleasant, but I felt her tension. I don't consider myself anyone's rebound, Dr. Winters, but I am fortunate to work with the most brilliant climate scientist in the field. Claire's smile tightened. Ivy always did attract talent. In the lab and elsewhere, she touched my arm. Could we speak privately, for old time's sake? Before I could answer, a conference organizer approached, saving me. Dr. Roberts, the university press team is ready for your interview. We need to go, I told Claire. It was interesting seeing you. As we walked away, Margaret exhaled. I almost feel sorry for her. Why? Because she lost you. Margaret's frank admission made my heart race. And I'm the one who gets to celebrate with you tonight. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of interviews and congratulations. By the time we reached our hotel room, I was exhausted but elated. We did it, I said, collapsing onto the king-sized bed. They loved our research. Margaret sat beside me, removing her earrings. They loved you. As they should. Seeing Claire, I began, not sure how to continue. Brought up feelings? Margaret's voice was careful. I sat up, taking her hand. Only gratitude that she's my past. You're the future I want. In the dim hotel lighting, Margaret's eyes darkened. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened. My hands found her waist, pulling her closer. I've been wanting to do that all day, she murmured against my mouth. Just that? I challenged. Her laugh was low and promising, not even close. Later, as we lay tangled in sheets, Margaret's head resting on my shoulder and her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin, I gazed out at the city lights below. A year ago, I'd been devastated by professional and personal failure. Now my research was being celebrated, and I was falling thoroughly in love with the most unexpected person. What are you thinking about? Margaret asked, looking up at me. Quantum entanglement, I replied, stroking her hair. Really? Physics after what we just did? I smiled. Not the scientific kind. The theory that once two particles interact, they remain connected regardless of distance. One affects the other, instantaneously, forever. Margaret raised herself on one elbow, her expression suddenly serious. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Under the stars visible through our hotel window, I whispered the words I'd been holding back. I love you. Her answering smile was brighter than any constellation. I love you too, have since Clearwater. As she leaned down to kiss me again, I realized some hypotheses didn't need endless testing. Sometimes, the conclusion was beautifully, perfectly clear. "Pass the string theory section, would you?" Margaret called from her desk, surrounded by stacks of research papers and empty coffee mugs. I slid the folder across our shared home office, marveling at how natural it felt, this domesticity we'd built over the past 6 months. After the conference breakthrough, everything had accelerated. Our research gained international attention, funding poured in, and Margaret had moved into my apartment within weeks. "We should submit the final draft tomorrow," I said, stretching. "The journal's deadline is Friday." Margaret nodded absently, red hair escaping its clip as she scribbled notes. We'd spent months co-authoring a paper that combined our research approaches, potentially revolutionizing climate prediction models. Academic collaboration had never been so satisfying. "Almost done," she promised. "Then we can actually enjoy the weekend without atmospheric carbon counts haunting our dreams." I smiled, watching her work. Even after all these months, the sight of her, focused, brilliant, passionate, still made my heart race. The doorbell interrupted my admiration. "That'll be dinner," I said, heading to the door with my wallet. Instead of our usual delivery guy, I found Professor Morrison on my doorstep, clutching a bottle of champagne. "Catherine, this is unexpected." "I'm not interrupting anything important, am I?" she asked, peering past me. "Just finishing our paper." "Come in." Margaret emerged from the office, surprise registering when she saw our department head. "Professor Morrison, is everything all right?" Catherine beamed, holding up the champagne. "Everything is perfect. I couldn't wait until Monday to tell you both." We moved to the living room, curiosity piqued. Catherine seemed uncharacteristically excited, almost bouncing as she sat. "The university trustees met today," she began, "and unanimously approved the establishment of the Roberts Thomas Climate Research Center. Full funding, dedicated building staff, everything you proposed and more." Margaret gasped. I sat frozen, processing the news. "Our center?" I finally managed. "They approved all of it?" "Every penny," Catherine confirmed. "Your joint research has attracted more attention than anything this university has produced in decades. They're breaking ground next month." I looked at Margaret, seeing my own shock and joy mirrored in her face. This was the culmination of everything we'd worked for, professional validation beyond anything we'd imagined. Catherine popped the champagne, filling the mismatched mugs we hastily provided. "To the future of climate science," she toasted, "and to the 2 women revolutionizing it." After she left, Margaret and I stood in our kitchen, still dazed. "We did it," Margaret whispered. "Our own research center." I pulled her into my arms, overcome with emotion, partners in every sense. That weekend, we attended the university's winter holiday party, no longer concerned about keeping our relationship discreet. News of our research center had spread, transforming us into minor celebrities in academic circles. The grand ballroom sparkled with festive lights as we entered, Margaret resplendent in a deep green velvet dress, me in a tailored black suit. Colleagues who'd once whispered about propriety now approached with congratulations and research proposals. When the music started, I led Margaret to the dance floor without hesitation. As we swayed together, I noticed a few disapproving glances from older faculty members, but found I no longer cared. "Remember when we thought this would damage our careers?" Margaret murmured against my ear. "Seems like another lifetime." "Speaking of lifetimes," she said casually, "I've been thinking about Clearwater Temple. Missing the meditation cushions and grass-flavored tea?" She laughed softly. "Not exactly. But I thought it might be nice to visit again, for a special occasion." Something in her tone made my heart beat faster. "What kind of occasion?" Margaret pulled back slightly to meet my eyes, the kind that involves questions about spending our lives together. Questions I'm not asking here, surrounded by the physics department. My breath caught. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you, Dr. Roberts. And someday soon, in the place where we first met, I'd like to ask you a very important question." The next week found us back at Clearwater Temple, not as retreat participants but as special guests. The meditation master remembered us, welcoming us with knowing smiles, as we requested access to the eastern courtyard where we'd first connected during the power outage. Snow blanketed the maple tree where we'd once sat shoulder to shoulder, the meditation cushions replaced by winter stillness. Margaret led me to the center of the courtyard, her breath visible in the cold air. "When I came here a year ago," she began, I was seeking clarity. What I found instead was you. Brilliant, stubborn, reluctantly enlightened you. She took both my hands in hers. Science teaches us to question everything, to seek evidence before drawing conclusions. Well, I've gathered extensive data over the past year, and my conclusion is this. I want to build more than research centers with you. I want to build a life. Margaret knelt in the snow, pulling a small box from her coat pocket. Ivy Roberts, will you marry me? The ring inside was simple yet elegant. A band of white gold inlaid with a pattern reminiscent of wave functions. Yes, I whispered, tears freezing on my cheeks in the winter air. My hypothesis exactly. As I pulled her up to kiss her, snow began falling gently around us, the temple bell sounding in the distance, marking the end of one meditation and the beginning of another, lifelong practice.